Hey, good evening, everybody. What's going on? What's going on? This your girl Tiffany coming through here live in effect. And tonight's subject is going to be about AIDS and HIV in the Black community. And the reason why I am on this subject is because December the 1st is AIDS Day. All right, so it's the World AIDS Day. Um, there's not much talk about AIDS in this current time as it was back in the early 90s and the 2000s. All right. So why am I on the subject about HIV? Because it's very prominent in our community. It's a serious disease that plagues our community where we have lost a lot of our loved ones due to this deadly virus. And it really makes me upset when I hear people say things like AIDS is a hoax or AIDS doesn't exist. There's no such thing as HIV. It's fake. So when people say that, it just made me cringe because it goes to show the ignorance and how people don't really to care enough to actually study about this deadly virus, and to make a joke out of it is problematic. And then we done had people who actually believe that Dr. Sabi cured people from HIV and AIDS, and that's a problem because there's no information that can validate or that can prove that he did in fact cure people from HIV and AIDS. And that's a lot of misinformation on there. Now, there has been talk about people trying to find a cure for it, right? There's been people trying to find medicine to get rid of it. But we don't know anyone per se that is cured from HIV, okay? We don't know that. Um, I had someone in my family, one of my uncles, had passed away from AIDS, all right? And he was contracting that because he had a relationship with a woman who was HIV, who had HIV, and she died from HIV complications. So it took him years and years later to get tested. So my grandmother at the time told my uncle, "Hey, you need to go get tested. I need to know where your status is at." And so when he finally decided to get tested, that's when he found out that he had full blown AIDS. And they were sending him medication in the mail, but he didn't want to take them. He pretty much did a lot of drinking. Now he had battled with drug addiction at one point. He battled with drug addiction. He was out there in the streets. He was out in the streets and all. But he did not want to take his medicine. So his whole thing was I'd rather drink to get rid of my problem than to take the pills. And so for me, it's very close to me. This is near dear to heart because this is someone who I was very close with who lost their life, who lost his life over a virus. And that's how serious it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use statistics, and then we're going to get into the information about what is AIDS and HIV. And then there's books out there. So people won't come up with these speculation that it does not exist or it can't happen to them. And it's so sad that a lot of youngsters out here, especially in this day and age, run around having sex the way they do and not thinking about using protection. There's people going around here having a bunch of children. And I'm not against folks having kids, but you gotta be careful who you have intercourse with. You gotta be careful who your partners are. You can't just lay over with anybody and not know what their status is, and that's problematic. And where I'm at, there is a lot of hypersexuality going on. Where I'm at, as far as the city I'm in, there's a lot of hypersexuality, and so there's been cases of the AIDS and HIV epidemic taking place due to that. So let me go ahead and get started. All right. So what I want to do is I want to get to the source, right? We're gonna talk about CDC. Now, many people want to look down on CDC and say, "Oh, the information they have is not accurate. This, day, other." Well, they're pretty much considered as one of the most reliable sources out there. All right. So what I want to do is I want to get into what AIDS and HIV is first before I go into CDC. All right. So let's go ahead. All right. So now let's look at what AIDS and HIV is. So HIV, which stands for human immunodeficiency virus infection, and AIDS stands for acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So again, as I said, HIV stands for human immunodeficiency virus infection, and AIDS stands for acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. All right, and it's a spectrum of condition caused by infection with the HIV, a retrovirus. Following initial infection, an individual may not notice any symptoms or may experience a brief period of influenza-like illness. All right. All right. So, anyway, so following initial infection, an individual may not notice any symptoms or may experience a brief period of influenza-like illness. Typically, this is followed by a prolonged incubation period with no symptoms. If the infection progresses, it interferes with more. It interferes more with the immune system, increase the risk of developing common infections such as tuberculosis, as well as other opportunistic infections and tumors, which are otherwise rare in people who have normal immune function. These late symptoms of infection are referred to as acquired immunodeficiency syndrome (AIDS). This stage is often also associated with unintended weight loss. All right, so now it goes on to say that HIV is spread primarily by unprotected sex, including anal and vaginal sex, contaminated blood transfusion, hypodermic needles, and from mother to child during pregnancy, delivery, or breastfeeding. Some bodily fluids, such as saliva, sweat, and tears, do not transmit the virus. Oral sex has little to no risk of transmitting the virus. Methods of prevention include safe sex, needle exchange program, treating those who are infected, as well as both pre and post exposure prophylaxis, or was it prophylaxis? Sorry, yeah, prophylaxis. Disease in a baby can often be prevented by giving both the mother and child antiretroviral medication. HIV and AIDS has a large impact on society, both as an illness and as a source of discrimination. The disease also has large economic impacts. There are many misconceptions about HIV and AIDS, such as the belief that it can be transmitted by casual non-sexual contact. The disease has become subject to many controversies involving religion, including the Catholic Church's position to not support condom use as prevention. It has attracted international medical and political attention as well as large-scale funding since it was identified in the 1980s. So HIV made the jump from other primates to humans in West Central Africa mid to in the early to mid 20th century. AIDS was first recognized by the United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in 1981, and its cause, HIV infection, was identified in the early part of the decade. Since when AIDS was identified in 2021, the disease has caused an estimated 40 million deaths worldwide. In 2021, there were 650,000 deaths and about 38 million people worldwide living with HIV. An estimate of 20.6 million of these people live in Eastern and Southern Africa. HIV and AIDS is considered as pandemic, a disease outbreak which is present over a large area and is actively spreading. So it goes on to say the United States National Institute of Health and the Gates Foundation has pledged $200 million focus on developing a global cure for AIDS. While there is broadly While there is no broadly available cure or vaccine, antiretroviral treatment can show the course of the disease and may lead to a near normal life expectancy. Treatment is recommended as soon as the diagnosis is made. Without treatment, the average survival time after infection is 11 years. Two individuals have been reported cured of AIDS, known as the Berlin patient and the London patient. So, according to the information from Wikipedia, only two people have been reported to be cured from AIDS. Now that's sending a red flag, doesn't it? I know for me it does. It's sending a lot of red flag because now the question becomes, well, why is these medication are not accessible to those who currently living with it? So let's look at the information real fast. So it says the Berlin patient is an anonymous person from Berlin, Germany, who was described in 1998 as exhibiting prolonged post-treatment control of HIV viral load after HIV treatments were interrupted. So it says the phrase Berlin patient was later used to preserve the anonymity of a different individual claimed to have been functionally cured of HIV infection. When his case was presented at the 2008 conference on retroviruses and opportunistic infection, where his cure was first announced, and because he lived in, was treated in Berlin, this second Berlin patient chose to come forward and make his name, Timothy Ray Brown, public in late 2010. All right, so it says 11 years later, nearly on the same date, the same conference, it was announced that it appeared that a third man had been cured. He was called the London patient. The patient described made himself and his name Adam Castellijo public in March of 2020. He also received a bone marrow transplant to treat a cancer, but was given weaker immunosuppressive drugs. The selected donor also carried the CCR5-A32 mutation. All right, now this may sound like good news, but then the question becomes, well, if there is, in fact, two or three people that are foreign that was able to get cured from AIDS or HIV, then why are those medicines not available worldwide? Why is it not available in these hospitals and pharmaceutical companies? That's a question that many may ask, including myself, because you wonder, well, how is that possible? And why is it not really being known to the public? Why aren't people coming forward and addressing this and saying, hey, there is a cure for it, or there is a medicine that can bring some form of control, to make it seem like it's curable or whatever the case may be. So it's a lot of question that's going around regarding to this. Hey Norman, how you doing? So yeah, there's a lot of question regarding to this because we trying to figure out, we trying to know what's going on. I'll be back. All right, so I'm back. But the question becomes, how is that possible? How is that reasonable? And why can't an average individual here in America gain access to medicine? But let's continue. But then it's interesting because Tony Ray Brown passed away in 2020. Hold on. Okay, so in September 2020, Brown revealed the leukemia that prompted his historic treatment had returned in 2019 and that he was terminally ill. Brown entered hospice care in Palm Spring, California, where he later died on September 29, 2020. So he went from having HIV and AIDS to the treatment that pretty much supposed to cure him from it, allegedly. So now he ended up with leukemia and he died. But again, there's a lot of question behind it. I mean, it brings about a lot of speculation. But let's go ahead and look at the statistics in our community. All right, there we go. So now, so let's look at HIV and African American people. HIV risk behavior. So it said the risk of getting or transmitting HIV varies widely depending on the type of exposure or behavior. Most commonly, people get or transmit HIV through anal or vaginal sex, or sharing needles, syringes, or other drug ingestion equipment, for example, cookers. So now, sexual behavior among Black slash African American people with diagnosed HIV in the U.S. 2019. Now, this is 2019. Okay. All right. So it says getting and keeping an undetectable viral load is the best way for people with HIV to stay healthy and protect others. So 7% of all people overall with HIV, of 7% of Black slash African American people with HIV had sex without using any HIV prevention strategy in the past 12 months. Now, let's check this out. It goes on to say ingestion behavior among Black and African American people who inject drugs in 23 USC 2018. So all people without HIV is 33% use a syringe after someone else used it in the past 12 months. So Black African American people without HIV is 23%, right? Check this out. All people without HIV use any ingestion equipment after someone else used it in the past 12 months. African American people without HIV 50%. All right. So that's the high risk behavior. But it says HIV and African American people PrEP coverage, which is the pre-exposure prophylaxis, right? So that's supposed to be like the PrEP pills and all that. All right, so it said coverage is one of the six ending the HIV epidemics in the U.S. indicators. PrEP coverage refers to the estimated percentage of people with indication for PrEP classified as having been prescribed PrEP. All right. So it goes on to say overall goals increase the estimated percentage of people with indication for PrEP classified as having been prescribed PrEP to at least 50% by 2025 and remain at 50% by 2030. All right, so PrEP is highly effective for preventing HIV from sex or injection drug use. So it says only 8% of Black African American people who could benefit from PrEP were prescribed PrEP in 2019 compared to 23% of people who could benefit from PrEP overall. All right, now then, now this go back to my initial question. How is it that in a community like the African Americans, right, they are only offered PrEP, right, as a solution to prevent HIV and AIDS, or they might be offered treatment medication. But how is it that in other countries that there is supposedly a cure? I mean, if you're wondering what I'm wondering, right? How is it that there is a cure in other countries, where places like Berlin and London, but you got people, especially within the African American community, they gotta take PrEP. I mean, I'm a bit confused by this. I'm gonna be very honest. I'm pretty confused. I'm pretty confused. All right. So let me see. Norman said, "All is well in the not so white North. I was born in Arcadia, Louisiana." And Fela Kuti died of AIDS. Yeah, he did. He surely did. He did die of AIDS, and that was in 1997. But yeah, that's a lot of question behind that. How is it that if you go to a place like Berlin and London, and there's patients that allegedly was cured from AIDS, but everybody else don't have a cure? As Arsenio Hall used to say, kind of makes you wonder, hmm. It just kind of makes you wonder, hmm. But let's continue. Let's continue with the statistics. Now let's see. It says HIV in African American people incident. So the HIV incident is one of the six indicators. HIV incidents refer to the estimated number of new HIV infections in a given year. The overall goal decreased the estimated number of new HIV infections to 9,300 by 2025 and 3,000 by 2030. So, 41% of the estimated 34,800 new HIV infections in the United States in 2019, 41% were among Black and African American people. Now, look at the chart right here. So, in 2015, we see that the number was 15,400, right? Okay. And then right here it says 2016, 15,500. Then it went down some in 2017, 14,900. So it went down again and it went down, right? So these are the charts right here is dealing with African Americans from 2015 to 2019. So 14,300 African Americans have been diagnosed. Well, as far as the HIV incident is concerned, right? They were among the people, 41% of the people that you know that caught HIV. Okay. Um. So look at 2018, but the number was pretty high in 2016. In 2016, there's a lot of question now. How is that black people supposedly, right? Supposedly, supposedly be 13% of the population. Again, I don't believe that. I don't believe that black folks is 13% of the population. I think the number is a little higher than that. If you ask me, I think the number is about 20%. At least we gotta be about 20%, or 21%. I don't think that we 13% of the population. But we're gonna go with the argument, all right? I said we 13% of the population, and we make up the highest number of people that is more than likely going to be infected with HIV and AIDS. Okay, see now, this is where I have to pick your brain. You said Dr. Sabi proved in the 80s it was curable. Okay, well, we have to see exactly Dr. Sabi's work. We had to see documentation to prove that Dr. Sabi indeed cured people from HIV and AIDS. Because that's the question. We have to see the documentation. Because it sounds good, but where is the proof? What's the name of the patient? Who was the patient that got cured from Dr. Sabi? Or patients? How many people did he cure from HIV and AIDS? That's the question. Because I done heard it so many times, but I have yet to see any documents or any evidence to prove that he indeed did that. Just like I have speculation about the people in London and Belgium being cured from HIV and AIDS. So again, there has to be documentation out there to actually prove that. All right. And you can't say that, oh, he cured people by telling them eat alkaline diet and all of that. Okay, because alkaline diet, that's not gonna do it enough, because you can't be on alkaline diet. I mean, there's nothing wrong with trying alkaline diet, but you gotta have something beyond that. Because if you're using alkaline, that means you're taking away the acid that is in your body. And we need acid in our body. As a matter of fact, we are made of acid. We got to have acid in our body to break down the bacteria, right? And to break down all the other things that goes on within our system. So if somebody make an argument and say that, oh, well, he tell people to use alkaline diet as a way to cure themselves from disease such as HIV and AIDS, then that's very problematic. And to me, you're lying, because there's no way an alkaline diet is going to get rid of HIV and AIDS. It's just like people saying that alkaline can get rid of cancer. How? You gotta show documentation. You gotta show some medical research that can prove that alkaline can get rid of people who have can get rid of cancer in people and can get rid of viruses such as HIV and AIDS. You have to show documentation. You have to show medical research. You have to show me a microbiologist, a molecular biologist that can prove this, a virologist, an immunologist, a bacteriologist, an epidemiologist, and a biologist that can actually show and prove and say This is fashion. This is the truth. Here's the accurate research. Here's accurate information. Here's the documentation. Okay, so you saying that Mama Pill has documents. So if she has the document, then why is it not out there? It should be available to the public. It should be available to a public where people can actually see that. And his source should be backed up by those in the professional field, not by another herbalist, not by another naturologist, not by somebody who study plants, right? We need somebody who's in actual medical field that can prove and support the claims of Dr. Sebi. You gotta have that, or otherwise it's inconclusive. It's invalid. So we have to be careful when we say things like that. No disrespect to Dr. Sebi. May he rest in peace. I mean, I think he meant well when he tried to make sure that people get proper diet and whatnot, but it's an exaggeration to say that he cured people from disease. To me, it's an exaggeration because his information or his work has to be supported by those in the medical field, right? It has to be, and I'm gonna say it again, it has to be supported by somebody that's a immunologist, a virologist, someone who studies viruses, or epidemiologist, someone who studies epidemics or diseases, a bacteriologist, someone who studies bacteria, a molecular biologist, right, who study molecules, a microbiologist who study little tiny organisms, right? Um, or somebody that's a medical biologist, someone who's in the medical field dealing with biology, or a geneticist. If those two people cannot validate and support his claim, then there's really no argument. And I'm not against home remedy. I'm not saying that home remedy cannot be used in medical fields, but it has to be where it has to be effective. It has to be effective for doctors to actually use. And again, we have to be careful with people who claim to be herbalists and say they can cure people from disease. Well, if you can cure people from disease, have you went through Food and Drug Administration? If you haven't went through the Food Drug Administration, then it's a no-go. Because in order for you to prescribe medicine to people for diseases such as cancer and HIV and COVID, you will have to go through the Food Drug Administration to get approved. You have to go through that. There's no way around it. Or otherwise, when you put out labels, you have to say that it is not approved by the Food Drug Administration. And it's not to cure or not to diagnose or not to treat, etc. So you got to have that on the label. Because if not, and you market to people as, hey, this is curable and you ain't got to worry about this thing other, then you can be prosecuted for that. That is serious and that's dangerous. So to be on the safe side, you better make sure that if you gonna sell some products, some natural herb products, you better make sure that it says that it's not FDA approved. So that way people will know. Because otherwise, if you put it out there and people think that this is FDA approved, and you're not telling them that it's not FDA approved, and you put it out there, your ass in trouble. I'm just telling you that. So People gotta be careful. Don't play with folks' health like that. Now, it's one thing if you give home remedy for like a common cold or maybe like a little flu or something, you know what I'm saying? Or, to help clean the bowels. Like, for example, a castor oil. If you take castor oil, that helps cleanse your bowel movement. That helps you with your bowel movement, right? If you take cod liver oil, that helps you with your cold. All right, see, that's different, right? For little stuff like that. But when it comes to something major, nah, you have to go to those that are in the professional field. You have to deal with those in the medical industry. Because these are people's lives that you're dealing with. Okay, so now the question becomes, what is the documentary that Nick Cannon did? And I can't rely on the word of Nick Cannon. I can't rely on the word of Nick Cannon. So Nick Cannon has to make sure that he done did his thorough research. If he ain't do no thorough research, then what good is a documentary? What good is a documentary if Nick Cannon ain't doing no thorough research? And again, I'm not against home remedy, but when it comes to certain stuff, you can't not use home remedy for every single thing. I'm saying it again, you cannot use home remedy for every single thing. Some things is left up to the doctor. It's left up to the doctors and nurses to deal with, not somebody that's urban. So hopefully Nick Cannon did his thorough research. If not, then the information can be considered as pseudo. Just all right. All right then. All right. So HIV on African American people, the diagnosis. Right. So check this out. African American people accounted for 42%, 15,305 uh, of the 36,801 new HIV diagnoses in the United States and dependent areas in 2019. Now, watch this. Check this out. Among Black people, all right. So again, it says among Black African American people, most new HIV diagnoses were among men. So male to male contact, right, 79%. Heterosexual contact, 14%. Ingestion drug use, 4%. Male to male sexual contact and ingestion drug use, 3%. So now, watch this for the women. Heterosexual contact, 91%. Ingestion drug use, 8%. So, most of the diagnosis of HIV and AIDS is very common amongst Black males that have male to male sexual contact, meaning engaging in homosexual activity. This is according to the statistics, okay? This is not, this is the statistics that majority of the males that are diagnosed in our community with HIV and AIDS, right, are mostly those who had sexual relationships with other men. So those who are either homosexual or those who are bisexual, right? Or what we say in the hood, the down low, those who on DL. That's a statistic. And women, how do they catch HIV? According to the information, heterosexual contact. That means that they sexually involved with men who have contracted these diseases. So they make up 91% of that, right? So those women who are having unprotected sex are at a high risk of catching HIV and AIDS. Okay, and men who are having unprotected sex, especially with other men, are at a very high risk of catching HIV and AIDS. Right. So now let's go down. Let's go down and say HIV affects Black and African American community more than any other racial ethnic group. Right. So it says Black and African American men male to male sexual contact is at 9,123. So we can see Hispanic and Latino men male to male sexual contact is 7,820. So they the second highest. And then white men male to male, that is 5,805. African American women, right, heterosexual contact 3,473. African American men, heterosexual contact 1,646. And then you got the Latino women, right, Hispanic women, 1,147 heterosexual. White women, heterosexual contact 954. All right, so again, this says a lot. Now, this really says a whole lot. Check this out. So it says trends by sex. Okay. So 7% is men, 11% is women. All right. And then when we look at the trends by age, 16%, 13 to 24. And it's stable from 25 to 34. And 35 to 44, 9%. 45 to 54, 21%. 55 and older, stable. Okay. So we're looking at the numbers. So the two highest number is between the age of 13 to 24 and 45 to 54, right? And this is back in 2019. Okay. All right. So now let's go on to the next information. All right. So Black Americans HIV/AIDS basis February 2020. This comes from kff.org, right? Let's look at the website. All right. So key facts. Black Americans have been disproportionately affected by HIV and AIDS since the epidemic's beginning, and that disparity has weakened over time. Although they represent only 12% of the U.S. population, again, I think the number is inaccurate. I think it's more than 12%, but we're going to go along with it. Black people account for a much larger share of HIV diagnosis, 43%. People estimate to be living with HIV disease 42%, and deaths among people with HIV 44% than any other racial ethnic group in the U.S. Among Black Americans, Black women, youth, and gay and bisexual men have especially hit hard. A number of interconnected challenges contribute to the epidemic among Black people, including poverty, lack of access to health care, high rates of some sexual transmitted infection, smaller sexual networks, lack of awareness of HIV status, and stigma. All right, despite this impact, recent data indicates some encouraging trends, including decline new HIV diagnosis among Black people overall, especially among women, and a leveling off of new diagnoses among Black, gay, and bisexual men. However, given the epidemic's continued and disproportionate impact among Black people, a continued focus is critical to address HIV in the United States. Okay? So, again, it's pretty much the statistic is pretty much similar to the one that I showed from CDC website. Okay. So now let's go down to here. It says The latest data indicate decline in both the number and rate of annual new diagnoses among Black people in recent years, including among women. So Black people accounted for more than 4 in 10 deaths among people with a HIV diagnosis. Death may be due to any cause in 2017. The number of deaths among Black people with HIV diagnosis decreased 8% between 2010 and 2017. Despite these declines, HIV was the sixth leading cause of death for Black men between the ages 25 and 34, and eighth for Black women between ages 35 and 44 in 2017, ranking higher than for their respective counterparts in any other racial and ethnic group. So HIV death rates, right, are highest among Black people. In 2017, Black people had the highest age-adjusted HIV death rates per 100,000 to 6.6 compared to 0.9 per 100,000 whites. That number is significantly high. Those numbers are too high for a 13% of population. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and read this last part. Then I'm gonna have then I'm gonna give my thoughts. I'm gonna say something. All right. So it says transmission pattern vary by race and ethnicity. While male-to-male sexual contact accounts for the largest share of HIV cases among Black and white people, proportionally, fewer Black people contract HIV this way, and heterosexual sex play a bigger role among Black people compared with white people. Among Black people, 59% of new diagnoses in 2018 were attributed to male-to-male contact, and 34% were attributed to heterosexual sex. Among white people, 67% of the new HIV diagnosis in 2018 was attributed to male-to-male contact, sexual contact, and 15% was attributed to heterosexual sex. The remainder of HIV diagnoses in each group were attributed to other causes, including ingestion, drug use. Black women are most likely to have been affected through heterosexual transmission, the most common transmission route for women overall. Black women are less likely to have been affected through ingestion drug use than white women. Damn. All right. So among all women, Black women account for the largest share of new HIV diagnoses, right, which is 58% in 2018, and the rate of new diagnoses among Black women, 23.1, is 14 times the rate among white women and almost 5 times the rate among Latinos. Black women also accounted for the largest share of women living with HIV diagnosis at the end of 2017. All right, so it goes on to say, although new HIV diagnoses continue to occur disproportionately among Black women, data show that 43% decreases in new diagnoses for Black women between 2008 and 2018. In 2018, Black women represent about one quarter, 26% of new HIV diagnoses among all Black people, a higher share than Latino women and white women, who represent 12% and 16% new diagnoses among their respective groups. In 2016, more than half of gay and bisexual teens and young adults with HIV were Black. According to a national survey of those ages 18 to 30, about 3 times as many Black, 46%, and white, 15%, young adults say HIV today is a very serious concern for people they know. Almost twice as many Black young adults, 30%, say they know someone who is living with or has died of HIV and AIDS compared to white young adults, 16%. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna stop right there. So you guys, let me show y'all. If y'all want to look more into his website, go to kff.org. Right, go to kff.org, and here's the diagram here. And then you can also go on cdc.gov. Right. So I'm just gonna stop right here. And I'm gonna say something real fast before I continue. So here's the thing. The problem is that many of our people do not like to go and get tested for STD, especially the males. They do not want to go get tested. Our people do not think anything twice about living with HIV or what's the possibility of contracting AIDS. And when they do get their result, of course, they're not going to want to share that information or speak on it because when you find out that you have contracted a disease like that, you don't really want to expose that to anybody. That's something that you will keep to yourself. But I'm going to say this. A lot of our folks do not go to the doctor and get tested. And there has been times that I went and got tested, right? And I did not see too many black people lined up. Like they would have a little band at different events, like whether it be at a festival or they'll just come by the areas and give out free HIV tests. And I don't even see too many black people. I'm just, this is me. When I went and got tested, I didn't see too many of our people standing in line or waiting in line for the HIV test. It would be maybe a few of us that would actually go get tested. And what it is, a lot of us are scared. And then people will look at you funny when you ask a question like, where's your status? Do you have HIV? Do you have AIDS? Do you have any other sexually transmitted disease? People look at you funny. People look at you like you speaking a foreign language or something. Like, are you crazy? And I'm gonna say this, and I will say this, and I know some of y'all gonna get mad, but there are men that will get upset with women if they ask them about their sex. They will feel offended because some women, not all women, but some women don't want to have unprotected sex with them or let them raw dog them because they don't know the status. And it makes sense. So that's why when I kind of hear about people like Nick Cannon and all the rest of these folks out here just having children, it kind of makes me wonder, well, do you even know the status of your partner that you have sex? Do you know if they even got sex? If you know their status, then that'll be a different story. But if you don't know where their status is at, you just jump in and you have sex with them, then that could be a problem. Then they had this one rapper on what's the name of that show? Jumping off the porch. I think that's the name of it, jumping off the porch. This boy had like 12 baby mamas at the interview. And I think he got like over 14 kids. So I'm like, I can guarantee 9 times out of 10 he didn't ask no question. I guarantee that he just went on here and brought out. I guarantee he didn't ask them where is they stat. And I can guarantee some of those girls didn't even ask no question either. So, you can't just, what I'm saying is, I'm not against people having children. I mean, because we are here to technically procreate, but you have to be careful who you lay up with and have children with. You gotta be careful what type of lifestyle you live. So especially if you out here engaging into same sex relationship, or if you out here uh indulging into a lifestyle where you prostitute or you're a swinger or whatever the case may be, you have to take necessary action. You have to be careful. You have to be very cautious. So if you're gonna be out here living those lifestyles, right, it'll be your best bet to get tested very often. If you're the type of people that like to go sleep around with different folks, yeah, you need to get tested very often to know where your status is at. And you need to get that individual tested very often too to know what their status is. So that way before y'all make a decision what y'all gonna do with each other. Y'all need to know each other's status. You need to know about your partner. You need to know about the people that you have a sexual relationship with. That's important. You gotta have responsibility. You gotta have that accountability. And then, because you don't want to pass it on down in your genetics, especially as a mother, you become pregnant and your child lives with HIV because of the fact that you was having sex with somebody who had the virus and they got it from somebody else. So yes, sexual health. I'm gonna say this: sexual health is very important. Sexual health, just like mental health is important, sexual health is very important. If you plan on having children, if you plan on having unprotected sex, you need to make sure your sexual health is at a standstill. You need to make sure your reproductive health is healthy. You need to make sure you in good shape. But to be smart, make sure you use contraception. Don't go throwing away your condoms because you think you don't need no condoms. No, you want to keep them condoms around. Keep your condoms around. Don't go throw away your birth control pills. Don't throw away your birth control pills. All right. So when you use contraception, you have less chance, keyword, less chance of contracting a sexual transmitted disease. You're not at a high risk as you would if you had unprotected sex. Because once you have unprotected sex, you're at a high risk. So you want to be able to make sure that your status is good. You want to make sure that everybody is okay and it's safe for you to have unprotected sex. And that's all I gotta say on that. All right. So there's a book on Google, right? This book right here is called Free at Last. Free at Last by Anthony J. LaMelle Jr., Juan Jose Battle, and Michael Bennett. Okay. Free at Last, Black American in the 21st Century. Right. So in this book, all right, so it says African American HIV, AIDS, and social institution new realities call for new policies. Right. So this is written by Anthony J. LaMelle Jr. and Barbara M. Scott. So that's the introduction. We're gonna skip that. So as you can see, that's a diagram. So right here it says high black incarceration, black institution, HIV disorganization. Let me see when this book was written. So this book was written in 2006. All right. So we're gonna skip all that. All right. So it says new face of AIDS. AIDS began in the early 1980s, and its definition has changed with advances in medicine and treatment. It says in the early days there was a great deal of controversy surrounding the disease, but in those early days, the mass media and many in the public health sector went to the great lengths to associate the disease with people of color. There was a cross-institutional effort to identify Africa as the geographical origin of the disease. Others tried to identify Haiti as its possible origins because of claims that more people were affected there. By September of 1983, health departments and physicians had reported 2,259 persons meeting the surveillance cases definition of AIDS at that time. Of these cases, 917 had died. 58 of the cases had died before 1981, 10% in 1981, 39% in 1982, and 48% in 1983. 52% had died of pneumonitis cystis, pneumocystis carinii pneumonia, PCP, while 26% died of Kaposis sarcoma. Other died of both condition and other opportunistic infection. Almost all AIDS patients, 89%, were placed in three groups: men who had sex with men, 71%, 17%, which include 51% of infected women, and homophilus. Most of the cases, 57%, were white, 26% black, and 14% Hispanic. Only 147 cases were women by the end of 1983. And you know, back then, there was a scare tactic behind all of this. It was a scare thing. It was like a major thing going on. So people was on it back then. When they heard about how it hit hard within the gay community, that's when folks start to say, okay, now we need to bring awareness to this disease because this shit is real. Like rappers alike was bringing awareness to this shit. You know what I'm saying? They was really bringing awareness of, commercials, all of that. It was that serious. Even talk show hosts, they were speaking so much on this disease, man, from the 80s to the 90s to the early 2000s. They were speaking so much on the AIDS and HIV. That's how serious it was back then. And you had so many people dying back then from this virus. It was a rapid disease that was going around, and it was bringing a lot of scares to people. It was putting people in fear. It put people in danger. You know what I'm saying? There was a segment. If y'all watch that show, A Different World, right? So on A Different World, what's the lady's name that played on Barney? Tisha Campbell. Yeah, Tisha Campbell played as a girl named Cindy on A Different World, and she found out she had HIV and AIDS. So when she told people about it, they pretty much distanced themselves from her. That's when there were classmates of hers that were walking around wearing face masks. They wouldn't even touch after her. They would throw their food away and stuff like that. So what I'm saying is, it sounds like it's a bit exaggeration, but that's just how scared people was back then. They was too scared to the point that they didn't even want to get close to somebody that was HIV positive. Oh, you got HIV? Oh, you got the cooties. No, I don't want the cooties. Now they was ignorant. They didn't have the knowledge and understanding of the fact that HIV cannot be contracted through non-sexual interaction. You know what I'm saying? Or or anything else like that. You know what I mean? Like they didn't have the knowledge to understand that you don't contract HIV just by touching a person. But you would contract it if you was sharing needles, if you was having unprotected sex. That's how you would mainly contract that. Or if you had blood transfusion, like Arthur Ashe. Arthur Ashe died from AIDS because of blood transfusion, because he had a heart surgery, right? And he was losing a certain amount of blood, so he needed a blood transfusion. So when he got the blood transfusion, he contracted HIV and AIDS, and he died, and that was in 1993. Then, of course, Magic Johnson had caught it in 91. Yeah, he caught it in 91. Uh, um, he's still around to this day. He's still around to this day, living with HIV. So he became like the face of HIV. Hmm. Ain't that something? So to me, that's embarrassing. But he's still here after 32 years, or after 31 years. He's still here. He's still living. Yep. He's still living. All right. But, anyways, let's see what they go on and talk about. Oh, it says white indifference. The change of HIV and AIDS into a disease that mostly affect people of color and treatments have transformed into a chronic condition resulting in less attention being paid to the disease. This racialized situation has historical precedents from the very beginning of HIV and AIDS. Race relation between public health, medical workers, and racial minorities were strained. Western medicine had always taken a paternalistic position towards African Americans as part of its petitioner civilizing mission. These racialized practices and images have been an inextricable part of Western medicine consciousness that conceive of African Americans as trapped in contagion, degradation, and disease. In the process, African Americans were often described as dirty, disease-filled, hypersexual animals that were immature, indolent, and sexually perverted. That shouldn't be no surprise. There shouldn't be no surprise. Because, truth be told, that's how they always felt about us. That's how they always, that's not something new. Because they felt the same way about the slaves. It's dirty, filthy, nasty, undisciplined. They always felt that way. So, it's no surprise. Sexually perverted, it's no surprise. And it says the view that African Americans were somehow different from other humans had resulted in one involved episode of racism in the public health sphere in Tuskegee syphilis study, which followed 600 low-income African American males, about 400 of whom were infected with the disease from 1932 to 1972. Although during this time, penicillin was identified as a treatment for the deadly disease, the scientists conducting the study decided not to administer antibiotics on the grounds that it would interfere with their research on untreated syphilis. Right? All right. So, anyways, um, yeah. Where did I stop at? Okay, it said conducting the study decided to not administer antibiotics on the ground that it would interfere with their research on untreated syphilis. Many of the men between 28 and 100 died of syphilis. Some in the African American communities have viewed AIDS as a government intervention that was part of a larger genocidal strategy. This suspicion that came from years of racial bias in public health contributed to significantly fewer preventative intervention, less therapeutic treatment, and shorter survival time for African Americans, AIDS, AIDS and HIV patients. In addition, to the extent that African Americans do not trust the medical establishment, they have been excluded from clinical trials and treatment breakthroughs. Man, the manner in which funds were allocated for HIV/AIDS prevention and treatment provides an example of race-based organizational practices. In 1988, for example, the New York City community-based service organization Gay Men's Health Crisis had a $10 million budget and a staff of about 75. At the same time, in the same place, the Minority Task Force on AIDS had a budget of $1 million and a staff of 8, even though half the cases of AIDS in New York City involved people of color. So the GMHC was criticized for failing to reach bisexual and gay men of color, although many of their workers and clients were people of color. GMHC has since placed more people of color in prestigious positions, reflecting the fact that most of its clients are people of color. Yet it remains an organization founded and structured by white males. A colorblind attitude would dismiss this observation as of little importance. However, the policies that became part of the structure of the organizational culture are grounded in a particular set of values and viewpoints that are likely to be significantly different from those of African Americans. All right. So then it goes on to say in 1993, the National Institute of Health implemented the NIH Revitalization Act. The law requires that women and members of minority groups are included in all NIH-supported biomedical and behavioral research projects involving human subjects, unless there are clear and compelling justification and rationales for them not to be included. While this standard increased attention on African Americans, there remain a problem in terms of proposal proposal for behavioral studies and clinical trials that were considered to merit funding. Both explicit and implicit institutional biases in the normal screening process of awarding grants continue to exclude African American researchers. A number of programs have been instituted with soft support, including a minority supplement program in which an existing funded program can apply for another line of money to support a minority quote unquote research. This form of institutional buddy programs limits the amount of money that flows to African Americans because it lumps all minorities in one group and then dispenses funds only to those who curry favor with a white patron. The screening system thus selects participants on their ability to appear pleasing to white authorities. In addition, African American researchers must network with white researchers and play a Mendicant or Medinican role, excuse me. Yeah, they must play a Medinican role to participate in the minority supplement program. Woo! You know, it's so funny. It says those who curry favor with a white patron, right? And it says select participant on their ability to appear pleasing to white authorities. That's funny. That's funny in a sense of the fact that they were at that time bringing about institutional racism in the face of African Americans. So they was catering. They wanted to cater more to white people, right, who was infected with HIV and AIDS, and not so much deal with the focus on the African American community, unless they find certain individual favorable. I mean, you know, this is something that we don't hear about. See, this is something that have not been exposed to us about how the medical industry treated African Americans who had HIV and AIDS. How they didn't want to include them in the research project. Hmm. So I don't want to hear folks talking about, well, racism is long gone and that this is a new age and that was so long ago and this, day, other. Well, I don't want to hear that because obviously what we see here that racism continues to perpetuate. Not only it continues to perpetuate, it rears its ugly head to the public. Okay? So I don't want to hear that mess about, well, racism don't exist, it's a thing of the past, let it go, we all are human type of thing. No, because obviously there's people who don't value humanity, and we can see that obviously in this book. Now, again, this book was written in 2006, but the the same attitude still applies to this day. The same attitude still applies until this day. There's always inadequate help, inadequate resources, especially to those who are minority. You might think, well, Tiffany, you trying to make it sound like black people are the victims. Well, duh, yes. For the most part, black folks are the victims in this system. For the most part, out of everybody else, black people make up the number of those who have been victimized by the system, who have dealt with serious oppression from the system. But all right, so with that being said, that's all I have. All right, and the title of this book again is called Free at Last Black America in 21st Century by One Battle, Michael Bennett, and Anthony J. Lamel Jr. Okay. All right. So I'm going to show you guys the title of the book and then I'm going to close it out. All right. Oh boy. You find so many new information out there and those new information don't really be so surprising once you discover. That's the key thing. But anyways, you guys, y'all take it easy on yourself. And I appreciate you all sitting here and listening to me doing this video, watching my video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, share the channel, etc. And until next time, may peace and power and elevation be to all of you. And I hope you all have a great one. And I will catch up with you all later and keep you guys posted on the next subject. All right, peace. And stay protected. Okay, stay protected. Stop playing with your health. And be careful. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't let anybody shame you for questioning their status. Do not let anyone shame you for that. Real talk. Do what you got to do. Okay, you gotta protect yourself. You gotta look out for your health because your health is your wealth. And that's all I gotta say on that. So with this being said, peace and power elevation to y'all, and I'm out.